Welcome to Mojo Talks, where we explore the world through stories. I'm Mayur Channagere, visual storyteller and your host. Welcome to Mojo Talks with Mayur, and today we are extremely excited because we are doing a first interview, a guest interview with Ryan Lobo, who is a filmmaker, photographer, writer, and many, many more things. And I hope today's talk is going to be around creativity, about inspiration, about the ups and downs. So, Ryan, welcome to Mojo Talks.
Thank you, Mayur.
There are way too many things that we want to ask you, talk to you about. But before we start, how are you feeling?
Good. Ever so slightly nervous because I've known you so well, so I'm not sure how this conversation is going to go, but we shall see.
Even I'm actually nervous. You've been a friend, you've been a mentor, you've seen the dark side. You come from a science background, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how the switch happened?
When I was very young, I used to love painting, so I used to paint a lot. And I remember people saying to my parents that, "Oh, you are so blessed to have such a creative child," And hindsight being 2020, this so-called creativity, which everyone talks about, everyone's creative, you should be creative and all that. It takes you down certain roads which aren't necessarily common, let's say, not necessarily easy either. So a lot of people say being creative is a blessing, but it can also be a terrible curse, And I think if you're truly creative, you don't necessarily just create things to where everybody else is at, but you push the boundaries and you cross that into new spaces. And that makes you very alone. And that brings with it a lot of challenge and very frankly, misery as well. Because it's like a bushman in the Kalahari. A bushman in the Kalahari finds a diamond, a beautiful diamond, and he shows it to his tribe, and they look at him and say, "Hello, that's a rock." So only you think it's a diamond, and your perhaps your creative abilities and other abilities have led you to believe that's a diamond. But other people think it's a rock, and they don't know what the fuss is about. And in the end, they'll perhaps hang you from a tree if you talk too much about it. So in that regard, if you being creative or truly creative doesn't necessarily fix you in one field, because to be creative, you need to have resilience and you need to believe in what you're doing. It's like a tree, and the tree grows flowers and fruit and whatnot. You can't prevent it. So so I've always felt that I've been something like that. I'm not sure if it's a blessing or a curse, but it produces a certain yield, and that yield takes you in various directions, not only photography and film and writing, in various other directions. So if you are truly creative, all I can say is you can be dash sure you're going to be miserable in some regards, but there's some wonderful successes and transcendent moments along the way as well.
On that note, Ryan, I was reading somewhere even many of the great artists, as they grew old, they became more cynical about their own art, and they felt that their art or whatever that they were creating was not good enough. Does that happen with you?
End of the day, when you look at art, it's like that finger pointing at the moon. Okay, you're attempting to reveal something transcendent, something beautiful, you're something perhaps intangible, and you're just the instrument, and you pray for grace that you're able to do so. So there's a certain religious aspect to developing art, which is perhaps lost on a lot of people whose belief systems might not reflect that. So you can go down in various roads, let's say. So for example, a lot of the so-called greatest artists of our time are considered based on the zeitgeist of today, which is what people believe in today, which may not necessarily be in consonance with what the moon reflects. So for example, Van Gogh. No doubt genius artist, brilliant artist, so on and so forth. But he chopped off his ear and blew his brains out. And today his paintings have incredible value. One can ask some questions like, why? Why is the contemporary world looking upon this man as being a genius? So these are all questions worth answering, and maybe I don't have all the answers. But to answer your question more specifically, do you have doubt? Yes, of course, there's always doubt. Because when it comes to projecting what you do, a lot of people's egos depend on it, And in terms of myself, I'm always filled with doubt, and I look back, and very often You don't know if what you've done is correct or right, and you look back at stuff you've done 10 years ago and say, oh God, did I do that? So it's an ongoing process, but then I look upon it also as you're throwing seeds. And if you bring integrity and intelligence and true surrender to what is larger to your work, I believe you're throwing seeds, and those seeds can grow, and you're not in control of it. Then you're just an instrument through which art flows. You're not necessarily the ultimate creator. You've prepared yourself so that great things flow through you. I hope that answers your question.
In today's world, where, like, especially, the social media, Instagram, there's so much out there. Today, the scenario has changed, isn't it? Like, it's instant gratification. Way back, film, later digital, there was a certain thought process. We would take our time to shoot, and we had to wait for those 10 days for the film to develop and then see. And then there was this whole thing of appreciating or critiquing what you did, what you took. But today it's not the case. People are looking for instant gratification. Does that play on the psyche of people?
Well, I remember the days when we were shooting film, and you had a roll with 36, 37 shots in it. You had limited funds because all of us were broke. But we lived at a time right before the information age, when everything blew up on cell phones and, Facebook and Instagram, etc., etc. And there was a peculiar innocence to that time, but there was also a measuredness to what you did. So, for example, you had 36 shots, you better use them well. You weren't clicking 25 shots and then choosing the best one out of it. You took your time, you watched more carefully, you shot, you were more clear about what you wanted, and you got a product. But today, if you look at, you flip through Instagram, and in 5 minutes, you see what would have taken 10 years to do in the 90s, okay? Not even 5 minutes, 1 minute, and everything's within 20 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. It gives you a rush
of 1 second now.
1 second gives you a rush of endorphins because and I find myself looking at this sometimes, and it's never ending. It's feeding you with endorphins, but it's a false world, in my regard, which is that all what this does is it feeds you with what you should actually get from actually going out into the world and engaging. So it's like when you watch a film. When you watch a film, everyone thinks they're the hero in the movie, so you want to take the side of the good guy, and a lot of us think we are good guys in real life, and you watch this film and the hero defeats whatever's evil and he wins and he's a hero, and you watch the film and you come out feeling fulfilled. Why? Because you've lived that hero's life in the film, but real life continues. So what social media does, it takes you away from real life. So you might have a family, you might have challenges, you might have work. And engaging with that and succeeding in that in the real world is what's supposed to give you your endorphin fix. But now you get it with your cell phone.
But have we become immune to pain and misery? Like, for example, if you look at some of those fabulous images, like, I wouldn't say fabulous, but images that change the world, like the Napalm girl, right? Or the Bhopal gas tragedy, the image of the child that Raghurai took. It kind of gotten attention to an issue. Many of these images stopped wars, or people actually got onto the road and say it's enough. But today, I don't see that happening. Have we become too immune to pain or misery?
I wouldn't say we're immune to pain and misery. And since you brought up those two images, I'd like to speak about them. So the napalm girl, the little girl fleeing a village that had been hit by American planes which had dropped napalm in it, horrific image. A child, a little girl, I have a little girl myself, breaks my heart. But I don't think it stopped the war. Maybe it helped. But what happened after that was that Pol Pot killed 2 million Cambodians in Cambodia and the death camps. You had a very extreme communist kind of regime take over the neighboring country, and there was horror. There are not many photographs of that around, So there's a cumulative effect to actions, to what you put out in the world. And once again, wonderful photograph. It revealed terrible atrocities against civilian population. There was the My Lai massacre, so on and so forth. With Raghurai's photo, he shot the picture of that little girl being buried. I mean, once again, a terrible picture. But what's happened? The case is still in the Supreme Court today. Okay, nothing changed. The people responsible, nothing happened. The government got, perhaps paid off. so on and so forth. So while these are incredible images, they rode on the backs of incredible tragedies which continue to this day, the effects of, So it's a bit of a tricky territory to say that they change the world. I don't think the world changes. I don't think the world changes. We can attempt to change circumstances in the world. We can attempt to put out those seeds in the hope they lead to good things. And I think that's your duty as a creative person to some extent. But I don't think they change the world. No.
You started with painting and art, then photography happened, then film. You started shooting films. You've done some fabulous work with some really big names. Writing. What is your process? What inspires you?
Process.
Because at one conversation way back when we were having, you mentioned that most of the characters that you write about or you base your stories on are people that you met in real life. So how much is real life influencing your thought process and writing?
Real life influences the whole process in writing for sure. But once again, I'll go back to what I started off with, is that this whole creative process is a miserable process, actually. It's miserable because you are driven to do something which need not necessarily, it's very difficult to succeed. And I'll give you a couple of examples if you're talking about process. So you want to be creative, you want to do a good job, you want to do the best job, okay, the best job possible. So I was hired by a very big European foundation to do a series of photographs of garment workers across central India, okay. So I said, yeah, great. So I said, I'm going to caption these and all that. Yeah, sure, go ahead and all. So what the foundation wanted was me to shoot all these wonderful pictures of these people who had benefited from programs they were paying for, okay. So I went and I shot all these photo essays. I met garment workers and I said, hey, I'm shooting all these pictures and it's just these people in all these circumstances. Let me ask some questions. So I did a series of detailed interviews with people and I thought I might be taking the photo, but let them illustrate the photo in their own voices, tell me about their lives and all. And what came out was a tapestry of phenomenal interviews. I was like charged up. I was like, it's awesome. But when I submitted it to the foundation, they were horrified. They were horrified and I got fired. Because I said,
Wow.
These have to go, because I later found out that the foundation was being paid for by all the owners of these very big brands abroad, And what they saw in these photographs was perhaps a bit too much personal
Reality?
story. It kind of contradicted maybe some of the claims, but I wasn't thinking like that. I thought to be truly creative, and I don't want my photographs to be poverty porn. I don't want to shoot pictures of people and objectify them, turn them into these happy mill workers. With the foundation, that's a wonderful work. No, I thought let me ask them. So all these interviews which I submitted, I thought it was going to be great. They'd be interested. No, it ended in disaster, and I was fired. And I was very disappointed and all. But then I realized at that point that when you want to do something good in the creative sense, you should expect, it's very difficult because you need partners. And it's like you don't have the money to do it. I couldn't travel all over central India for weeks on end and I didn't have access. So the foundation was very important. In the same way, I wrote a film script, which I spent a lot of time in Liberia. And I met a contingent of Indian women peacekeepers. These women drawn from villages and towns across India. They formed a CRPF regiment, and they were keeping the peace in Liberia. So, I mean, if you've seen Blood Diamond,
Correct.
which is set in Sierra Leone, the
Sierra
neighboring
Leone,
country,
yeah.
it was all part of a similar theatre of war. So I was shooting another film there, and I went over and I met them, and I interviewed a lot of them, and I wrote a screenplay, about a woman who travels from India and goes to Liberia and who spends time in these horrific circumstances while trying to manage her family problems back home. She has an introverted husband, she has a child, and it was very favorably received by a very big Bollywood studio. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be made. And we worked on the script for 6 months. It was awesome. It was great. It was brilliant. It was fantastic. Everyone said. Then they got a very well-known actress who said, no, we have to remove the children from the picture because I don't want to be portrayed as an older actress. And they said, Ryan, this is going to work. It's lots of money. I said, no, I can't do that because it destroys the very essence of the film, which is you have these roles reversed. A woman takes the place of the man, quote unquote, goes to war, a husband has to look after the family, and these are very traditional families, and they dialogue in between on Skype once a week. I said, you can't remove the children. It's an no, but then I'll be typecast as an older actress. The production company was happy to remove this aspect, but I was like, I can't do that, and I walked. I pulled the script and walked, and it was a crushing blow to not only my little ego, which had grown slightly since then, but it was also a firm tap on the shoulder from reality, like, chill out, boy. No, you might think you hold that diamond like that Bushman, but having the world realize it is another story. It's difficult. There's a process. So when you talk about process, what's your process? The process is do it anyway and be ready for misery and challenge. And occasionally wonderful things happen.
Many of this particular generation, they don't see this side of the business, isn't it? I mean, it's completely different. They see the glamour, they see the money, they see...
When there's great rewards, like the vast majority of people who become creative professionals, vast of them disappear into the ether of history, let's say. A small percentage are hugely successful. There's a combination of luck, talent, ability, knowing the right people, etc., etc. But the vast majority disappear. So what keeps them going is this potential, and it is a great potential. There's also a secret potential, which is regardless of where you think you might end up in the financial sense and becoming famous, so on and so forth, there's also meaning in your life because you know you're in the right track and you continue doing it. And some of that comes from your faith, some of that comes from resilience, but you keep going.
How does one keep going? I mean, see, end of the day, you got to pay your bills, right?
Yeah.
If you do seriously take this path, it's not an easy path. I mean, as long as a bank balance is there.
Yeah. So it depends. Like, for example, if you want to cater to industry and do what they want, it's an easier road. You're likely to become successful if you're talented and good at what you do and you work hard and all that, yes. But if you want to push the envelope and you want to be true to that, there are going to be more challenges. So my suggestion is, if you're young and if you want to be join a creative field, photography, writing, films, etc., either join the industry and become good at it, or make enough money so that you can do what the hell you want. That's the ideal state,
Security is very important.
Well, you have to keep yourself alive and your family and the people who depend on you. Yes, of course.
Was it a gradual or a conscious decision to start writing, or did that happen parallelly? Or did these experiences, while you were shooting, you realized that there were stories and you started documenting it? Did you start writing?
Sometimes I don't know how much I'm in control of, really, which is that a lot of the creative directions I've taken on have found me, not the other way around. And you're compelled to do certain things, and you're compelled beyond what you can imagine. Like, so for example, writing began because I met these characters and there was a certain epic quality to them, even though they were ostensibly very ordinary people. And I had great affection for these people, who other people may not have liked, let's say. And I wanted to tell a certain story because I felt it deeply applicable. So I'd written a book, Mr. Hare Goes to War.
Yes.
About, it's essentially, you could say in some regards, the Don Quixote story. You have the idealist accompanied by the pragmatic, practical helper, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. And they go on this epic quest, And so all of us have a bit of the idealist and a bit of the practical fellow. I mean, it goes back to your question about, you have to provide for yourself. So, and they go on this epic quest. So I wrote this book set in India because at the time, it was 2014, politics had changed in India. You had a new government, you had great division and polarization between friends and family and politics and so on and so forth. And I thought this would be a good story to tell, this practical man and this idealist traveling down the Ganges, towards this heart of understanding of meaning, which is the Kumbh Mela, which is so central to Sanatan Dharma, and the adventures they have along the way. So I wrote it, it got published by Bloomsbury UK and so on and so forth. So I've forgotten your question, Mayur. What was it?
No, no. I think you are answered because the book, right? It's the main character from South who's actually up north, right? And that's where the story starts, and he starts traveling down. And you did mention that many of these characters were someone who you met
Yeah, absolutely.
in your
Yeah.
life, and that actually, many times I'm very scared. Somewhere in your writing, all of us sitting in this room will be featured. I don't know how.
No, you're already featured. You're a very practical man, Mayur. You would fall in the Sancho Panza category, but you do have a bit of the Don Quixote.
Don Quixote crazy.
In between meetings at Biocon and all the other corporates you do work for. It's a good thing. I see lots of success for you. Incredible success.
Thanks, Ryan. I mean, you've been instrumental in that. So Ryan, just picking off on the writing process, right? I mean, you have not restricted your writing to only films, scripts, etc. But you have taken it to the next level. You've been working with a lot of NGOs, helping them with various things. You want to share a bit about that?
Actually, I haven't been working with lots of NGOs, but I did help start one, which I'm the founder trustee of. Other people do most of the work, and I'm involved as a founder trustee. It's called the Sunbird Trust. So some years ago, I met this old friend of mine again after many years. His name was Colonel Christopher Rego, and he had served in the Northeast. Very good guy, and he had all this energy, and he was headed for retirement, and he wanted to do some good work in all these conflict zones, and he was doing various things. And my wife and I met him, and we decided to start this trust. And we thought we'd bring peace to conflict zones in India through education and livelihood development and so on and so forth. Places along the border areas and all. So Sunbird Trust began, and in a few years it's become very big. We do a lot of work with the army. We want to bring education to very far-flung areas beset by insurgency in Manipur, in Nagaland, Assam, in Arunachal now. All in close consonance with authorities and the army and so on and so forth. We improve the schools, we provide scholarships, we hoist the flag in our schools, even in areas which are beset with terrorism or insurgents, and end of the day, everyone wants to see their children have a good education and find good jobs and have a good life, including insurgents. So by improving these infrastructures, it leads, we believe, to more patriotic, more peaceful people in these areas. So it's doing wonderfully well, and I'm very honored to have been a small part of this. So that's one aspect, the Sunbird Trust. You can look it up, sunbirdtrust.com.
So for viewers, I will leave the link to all these websites in the description, so you don't have to write down.
Yeah. And in other realms as well. For example, you might write a wonderful book, but in India, when you write in English very often, even if you're a bestseller, it's 5,000, 6,000 copies. And you're being patted on the back by the same 14 people who come on NDTV and couple of other channels, and you go to the same literary festivals, you see the same faces, it's the same talking points, and after you say, who am I writing for, So you might write fiction, you hope that it's made into a film. For me, that dream crashed and burned with regard to the one screenplay I have. I have several screenplays. Anyone's interested, very happy to share. But so I found that policy writing, when it comes to policy in India, very often little tweaks in policy might make for huge differences on the ground. So I'm also involved in that. So in some regards, and in certain cases surrounding those issues.
Ryan, on that note, let's take a pause because there's so many questions that I want to ask you. And for the viewers, if you're enjoying this conversation as much as I am, do come back for the part 2 of our conversation with Ryan, where I will be asking him to share some stories and anecdotes behind some of his favorite shoots. Stay tuned and come back.